Hello and welcome to Unscripted with me, Nina Nannar. With Oscars campaigning in full flow and the biggest film awards of them all imminent, I'm joined by British writer, director and producer Nazrin Choudhury, whose powerful short film, Red, White and Blue, is up for an Oscar for Best Live Action Short. It looks at the repercussions of the recent overturning of the Roe versus Wade law on abortion rights in America. As you can imagine, it's become a huge talking point. Here's a quick look at the film.
Hi, I need an abortion, like, yesterday.
Do you have an appointment?
I tried calling, but I couldn't get through. I've come all the way from Arkansas.
Yeah, you and everybody from that state, and all the other ones, too.
Please. I'm desperate. I don't have time. I really need to get back to my son.
All I can do is take your name, honey, and put you on the waiting list. But I gotta warn you, it's pretty long.
Wow, Nazrin, just from that short clip, you can tell how hard-hitting it is. Let's just first talk about the fact that it's been recognised by the Oscars. I saw you at an event at the weekend. It was an Oscars dinner or luncheon or something like that. This is a bit of a crazy world, isn't it? I think I saw you talking to Bradley Cooper.
I did talk to Bradley Cooper. I talked to many people, actually. Carey Mulligan, Alexander Payne. There was like a room full of everyone that you identify with the world of entertainment in one very small room, relatively speaking. But yeah, and I was in it.
And were they aware of your film?
Yes, some of them have watched it. Some of them are, I think most of the watching and the viewing in the Academy screening room to finish up ahead of voting is happening right now. Voting opens, I think, on Thursday. And yeah, and then our fate is sealed as of the end of this month. And then we'll learn the ultimate decision of how our film has been received on the 10th of March.
This is your directorial debut, is that right?
Yes, this is my first time directing. I always thought I would direct back in film school. I went to the Northern Film School in Leeds, and I went to do screenwriting. But, you know, writing and directing, there's so much that you write on a page when you're thinking as a writer that there is a natural transition into directing. I thought I'd maybe do it then, but it took all these many years for me to finally get into the director's chair, partly to do with the fact that I was show running or working as a writer-producer in that space and able to work with directors to maintain my vision. But now, yeah, here I am directing for the first time.
So let's get this right. You are a British female director with an Oscar nomination.
Yes.
You are a rarity, sadly, still.
And also from working class South London, growing up, you know, this is something that we never think is really an option for us as a career. But somehow I find myself there telling my stories, and there seems to be an appetite for that. And I've been so welcomed over there. I'm really glad to be doing the job that I'm doing and in the home of entertainment, although, you know, it's a bizarre thing to say about our film because it's not entertainment per se, it's a story of depth and a profound situation that is revealing a circumstance for so many people across America who are dealing with their reproductive rights.
We saw the desperation in that film clip just there. Now, it was 2022 when Roe versus Wade was overturned. It caused shockwaves in America, shockwaves around the world. You were in the States when this happened. As a woman in the States, when this sudden thing happened and was really quite unbelievable, effectively outlawing abortion again in a number of states, how did you get your head around that as a British person? I mean, you're also an American citizen, yes, but as a Brit with our sensibilities here, hearing that?
Yeah, and I've been living there for a decade, or more than a decade now, and I have 2 young daughters. And so you just think of abortion as healthcare, and you think it's just there, accessible, because we've learned from the past that delegitimizing abortion is not going to stop it. What's going to happen is there's going to be a dangerous precedent set where people access that healthcare, but under unsafe circumstances, and they access it for many, many valid reasons. And it just seemed incomprehensible that that could be denied after half a century of that having been enshrined in law and protecting anyone with reproductive rights. It was really I think everyone knew that it could be coming down the pipeline towards us, but the actual reality of it when it happened in June 2022, really hit hard. And hit so hard for me specifically that the very next month is when I sat down to write this film.
So it obviously inspired you. Let's just go back. In 1973, there was the landmark case which allowed abortion. I mean, obviously, in America, it's slightly more complicated than that, but effectively, that's what it allowed, and that's what was overturned in 2022. You can't have been the only woman, I suppose, in America at that time who was like, I've got to do something about this.
Yeah, there are many people who are doing something about this, whether it's the organizations that have long championed reproductive rights. And let's not forget that even with Roe v. Wade, healthcare, such as the one that we are discussing, has been historically denied to many people who are socioeconomically challenged. Also, people who are, women of color have been historically unable to get the health care that they need. So even with Roe v. Wade in place, there were difficulties, and there were groups who have been campaigning for reproductive equality, reproductive justice. With this now happening, there's more work added to their plate. Legislators, just people in their communities, individuals. So this affects so many people. Everyone is doing their own part, playing their own part in trying to counter the negative consequences that are now on, so many people. My way of countering it was really through telling a story, because as a storyteller, it is our duty to just shine a lens on basically the world that we live in and the people that inhabit it. And we do that through characters, and we take you into a story world where hopefully you are just able to be a fly on the wall of someone's life as they're encountering this problem and then walking a mile in their shoes.
Did you know when you sat down that it was going to be a short film that you were writing, or did it sort of evolve into that? This is a very, very complicated story, and I have to say, people who make short films, they have my utmost praise, because it is so difficult to get your point into 11 minutes or whatever it was. Is that what you intended when you sat down?
Yeah, it's actually 22 minutes. It was like 11 minutes on the page, as in 10 and a half minutes, 10 and a half pages. And the tradition is like, it's, a page per minute is the count of it all. But I always knew it would grow to a 22-minute film to some extent because of the road trip scene that we have, and there's montage scenes. Anyway, taking aside the whole filmmaking and the length of it all, short films are challenging as well because there's no money to make short films. And I knew that that would be an obstacle. It's not a feature. There are different pools and pots of money and production companies that will do a feature versus a short film. But I was really adamant about doing a short film for many reasons. Firstly, I really do believe in the medium, not just as a way of it being director's calling card. And so many people set out to do a short film for that purpose. For me, I set out to do it not so much as a calling card, even though that's what it's become, but to tell a story in this TikTok generation that we have that is consuming shorter films, shorter videos, but to be honest also because it's a medium that is very valid in its own right, in the sense that if you can achieve the impact of what you would get from a 90-minute feature in the span of 22 minutes, but hopefully feels like only 5 minutes in the watching because you're so transported by it, then I feel like I've done my job. And it's muscular. It's everything it needs to be, nothing more, nothing less. Of course, there's a greater story to tell there, and maybe we will do that. But in this first instance, just to hit home and have people sit there for 20 minutes and not feel like it was a burden on their time, and to tell a fully realized story, that to me was creatively just very challenging and fulfilling to do.
I think it's very interesting that you talked about the duration being more attractive to younger viewers of today who've been trained, if you like, to have a shorter attention span. They can flick from one social media site to another. In a sense, are you also asking that generation to come up to look at this and say, it's also going to be your fight? You're the mum of I've got a daughter, you've got two daughters. We're also saying, okay, this is the state of affairs. maybe you want to get involved with this.
Yes, although I do think, to give credit to that generation, they do understand that something has happened that is going to affect them for a much longer time than it will affect people who are older than them. Just biologically speaking, the natural law of it all suggests that this is going to be their problem for a much longer time than it is ours. So they are already on top of that. And I think to just have them watch it, but to also watch it in a cross-generational way. Maybe they're watching it with family members who are passing by and wondering what they're watching and are drawn into the story, because their votes still lie with people of my generation, even though my daughters and their generation are set to inherit the true legacy of what this is going to be for them.
There's a recent report, very disturbing, saying something like 65,000 rape-related pregnancies have happened since the Roe versus Wade legislation was overturned. We don't know how many of those resulted in abortions or a full-term pregnancy, but the ruling about rape, that's a bit vague over this overturning, isn't it? One would assume in those states, if there'd been a rape, that you would be able to get an abortion, but it's not as simple as that.
No, in Arkansas, in fact, there is no exception for a pregnant person who needs this kind of health care, and probably needs it very early on. There's just no exception, even in cases of rape or incest. I think the mother's life has to be in jeopardy for them to be able to access that health care. And by the way, by jeopardy, it means it needs to be an emergency and in the moment that you're realizing that you need to give that care. And as we know, sometimes if you can't plan for those things, it actually adds an extra layer of jeopardy for a woman who is having to access that healthcare in that extreme circumstance. So that's why in our story, we demonstrate how you need to travel across 2 states from Arkansas into Illinois in order to get this urgent and necessary healthcare. And yeah, those statistics are shocking. They are unfortunate. And they are really demoralizing, which is why we need to tell this story. There are so many reasons why you might need this. You know, for myself, I actually had this procedure because I had pregnancy that was not viable. And so it was my 3rd pregnancy. And if I hadn't got that health care, then I wouldn't have been around to be the mother to my 2 daughters.
Was this in the UK or other states?
This was in the UK before I moved out there. But putting myself into those shoes and thinking, well, what would if I was living in a circumstance where I didn't have access to that, what would have happened to me? What would have happened for my daughters? They would have been left motherless. So when we talk about valuing life, we really need to think about people like my daughters who would have been left motherless. So there are so many reasons that you might need this, whether it's a non-viable pregnancy, the health of the mom, the rape-related cases, the sexual assault cases, you know, just the human dignity of it all, and to lead with compassion. That's unfortunately what has been lost. And our film is really trying to have a conversation in our own homes, and as far up and as wide as that goes, where we can just talk to each other in a non-confrontational, non-judgmental way, where we just really see each other and treat each other with integrity and compassion.
I wonder, Nazrin, what do the Americans make of, I know you're an American resident and you have citizenship there, but you are a Brit,
yes,
a South Londoner. I wonder what they make of this Brit coming along and delving into their politics and telling them what you think. I would imagine a sizable part of the population, which we see now, would be rather ruffled by this.
And they may well be, although I have to say we've had such positive feedback, including people who've told us they've changed their minds. But as the film grows and gets more attention, you know, I'm sure there'll be very many people who will be ruffled by this. Of course, my accent is the kicker here. You know, I always say you can take the girl out of London, but you can't take London out of the girl. But I am an American citizen. You know, I'm living there. I'm paying my taxes. I'm raising my 2 daughters there. And so what does America mean? It's the land of the free, and it's this melting pot of people who make up who we are as a country, which is why the film is titled Red, White, and Blue, because it's a problem for everyone who's living under the banner of this flag. You know, I am an American. I may also have this British identity, but I think I proudly own that duality. And I think sometimes it's easier to have different perspectives and different lived experiences of having lived elsewhere. That means that when you're a storyteller, you can bring all of those experiences to bear and sometimes be looking from the outside in as well as the inside out. Sometimes if you're only looking from the inside out, maybe you're not looking in the right direction as you need to fully evolve and have a critical thought process on something. But maybe our film will help with that.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first film you've directed. You wrote the film, but you've got experience of writing. You wrote on Coronation Street, which, you know, I absolutely love. So, and I'm looking at you and seeing a brown working class woman. And so I'm intrigued. We probably share similar stories,
Yes.
Nazrin, about your early days stepping into writing and getting your feet on the table of big flagship shows on British television in those early days. That's not easy.
Yes, and certainly not easy with a biomedical science degree. I went to King's College London to study biomedical science, thinking I would become a doctor, and then for a hot minute, worked in politics. I actually worked at Lambeth Council.
Okay.
And then transitioned into acting and then became a writer. Yeah, and I had this, like, the first thing I ever wrote, won a Focus on Talent award with a company called DNA Films with some brilliant producers, Duncan Kenworthy and Andrew MacDonald. And that led to me studying for my master's in screenwriting at the Northern Film School. And I did everything the wrong way around, actually, Nina. I became a produced writer first, and then I went to film school. So I had already started to work on many shows. I wrote for EastEnders as well, and Casualty and Waterloo Road. But yes, I was a storyline writer for Coronation Street, which is really where I started to learn about breaking story and the relentlessness of a machine that is like telling stories 5 days a week, learning how to tell quality stories in a very short amount of time. And I think that kind of grounding, so many wonderful voices have come out of the British soaps, you know, Russell T Davies, when you think about Sally Wainwright, so many, Jimmy McGovern, all of them cut their teeth on the iconic shows in the UK. And I feel so grateful that I had that experience, but then was able to transition into the United States and work in Hollywood on many shows like Jack Ryan and Fear the Walking Dead, where there is also that discipline of really telling, you know, big story arcs over a very long time.
Do they much care over there about your class? Well, I'm a northerner. Because we were chatting about this earlier, about in the early days getting into this industry and kind of disguising one's origins, you know. And I'm working class, daughter of a steelworker from Scunthorpe. But when I first sort of started knocking on the BBC doors, I was thinking, I better say Lincolnshire and I better say class, not class. And you kind of cover it up. And now I'm like, I'm a northerner and I'm so proud of it. But the things we do to get through the door, and I think lots of people of colour, you know, be they black or Asian, will share that kind of experience. I mean,
Yeah, it's known as code switching. There's a term for it. It's called code switching, where you adjust to just become, you almost hide who you are and code switch to fit the company that you're in. And of course, there's a certain element that you have to do that. You have to know the language of film. You have to be able to hold a conversation. And you have to, you know, allow people to see you. I'm sure that has happened. I will say that one thing that I have always been very strong about doing is to really own my identity and be clear about who I am. And let my writing speak for itself. Get them on the page, then you get them in the room, is kind of a common philosophy for many Hollywood writers who are, you know, doing the meetings when they're trying to staff on a show. It's like the writing has to be impenetrable on the page. I do feel like, actually, bizarrely, I think I've had to do that less in the States, and could own, they do understand the class issue, to just speak to that specifically. in America, they don't really think they have class systems there, and it's all here because they're watching things like Downton Abbey. And even though that's period, you know, it's very much something that's discussed here and talked about here. And so it's seen as something that is very British, this class system, as if it's something that only exists in Britain. It's absolutely there in America. People just don't talk about it and just aren't as aware of it. And actually, that's another thing our film goes into, is like setting that socioeconomic class that our character is in. I think because I'm very aware of it, maybe that's one of the reasons why I'm able to bring it to that story. But yes, in answer to your question, very aware of my roots, very aware of my origin, and own it and feel really proud, like you do now, to have that upbringing, to know what my parents did, to give me the education that I had, that I was lucky to have. And I just hope that there are other people who come from the backgrounds that we do, who see what we're doing and can know that they can do the same.
We certainly hope to. Just very briefly, before we finish, have you got your acceptance speech sorted out? I think you're the favourite in that category.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I don't know if that's quite accurate, but, you know, I love hearing that we are the favourite. Yes, I have to get that finished. I have mostly written it, but I'm going to go back and make sure that it's watertight and impenetrable, just like any script I write. So funny this is called Unscripted, because everything I do is scripted.
Scripted. But this was a very casual, lovely chat. But yeah, that's quite a platform if you want to say something on that stage. Nazrin Choudhury, the very best of luck. And thank you so much for joining me. That was Unscripted with my guest, Nazrin Choudhury.